Midsommer is the new film by Ari Aster, the same guy who created Hereditary, which was one of my favorite movies of last year. He's back now with his next film, Midsommer, and that's really the reason as to why I was interested in seeing this film, because everything I had seen, like images and whatnot, weren't really that interesting, but the fact that Ari Aster is attached to this movie is the whole reason why I went to go see it. Now, here's the question. Is it as good as Hereditary, and should you go see the movie? That's what we're talking about here on this review. This is a very difficult movie to review because I have to think about my audience. I have to think about my opinion as well as the opinion of people out there. And it's a bit complex to explain because I have opinions on this, and they're not like black and white. They're kind of mixed, you know. I obviously didn't feel the same way about this movie as I did Hereditary. I personally think Hereditary was incredible. I think Hereditary is a movie that's like a career-making film, and obviously it turned out to be that. Midsommer, in my opinion, just is there are similarities between Midsommer and Hereditary, but there was just something about Hereditary that, and we're going to get into it more in depth here, that Midsommer just could not do. It just couldn't do it. So the movie's kind of a co-production between the United States and Sweden, and the whole plot of the story involves a couple. It's mostly about the girl Danny, which is a very similar name to mine, but she basically is dealing with an issue with her boyfriend, and it's about a relationship that's falling apart, and both parties kind of know it is subconsciously. They both know it is subconsciously, but they don't really want to address it or do anything about it. And that's a very realistic perspective on that. I really like the fact that Mr. Astor went in that direction, because I remember reading that this was originally supposed to be just a slasher movie in Sweden, but he went in there and kind of created this story to really hit home with those of us who have been in that position where you're with someone, you kind of want to end it, but you really don't want to. You don't really know how to do it. You're confused. You're conflicted. And what happens to Danny is she suffers a very traumatic, life-changing experience at the beginning of the movie, and that sets the wheels in motion for her wanting to be closer and more involved with her boyfriend. The problem is, whose name is Christian, the problem is that he doesn't want anything to do with it, but he's basically playing along because he feels bad for her, so he doesn't want to dump her right away. He wants to stay with her. And that leads them on going on this vacation in Sweden with one of their friends who's part of this commune. And as you can expect, whenever you have communes, they are a metaphor, or in these films, not a metaphor, but a synonym for a cult. And things get really weird really fast. This is a very weird movie. Very, very strange. Ari Aster, let me put him over, first of all. I think he's a very great visionary director. There are scenes in this movie, the way he shot them, the way he plays with the camera, the way he positions his shots, that are really, really like next level stuff. He's really good at it. The way he plays with the music, he has like certain shots where it'll be a standing cam and you'll have characters coming in from the left and the right side sort of coming together on screen. You know, that stuff like that. You know, there's a shot where they're on the road and the camera actually goes upside down as they're entering this sort of like a pathway, and it was just done, this part of the road, and it was just done so well. Like, he's kind of, you know, painting this picture and kind of preparing the audience that, yeah, this is about to flip upside down. Now, one thing I'm going to tell you right off the hop is, just like Hereditary, this is not a movie for kids. Teenagers, fine. I'm talking about little kids under 12. This is not the movie for them. This movie has nudity, and I'm not just talking about like a butt or a boob shot. I mean, dude, Ari Aster really pushed that R rating. He pushed that R rating to its absolute max. I was stunned to see what I saw in this movie, being a regular movie theater, because they really pushed it. Even though he's kind of done that before, and movies have done that, it was just surprising to see that. And then there are a couple of extremely graphic, very graphic scenes, very graphic depictions of mutilation, violence, things that are just very gross. So letting you know ahead of time, if you're going to go see this movie and you have a weak stomach, I'm letting you know it's going to push you. I'm telling you. Now, it's funny because, you know, if you're a part of the horror culture, the horror movie culture, you know that these movies like this have been around forever. They just never hit the mainstream. Now, thanks to Hereditary getting that cult following, this one's, going to get a big push. But you rarely see films like this like on the big screen. You usually see them either in film festivals or, sometimes they pop up on Netflix because Netflix has a good little horror collection. They usually have stuff there. But man, this movie really pushed the envelope as far as what they could kind of allow in a movie. Now, that being said, as you're watching the film, it really picks up in the second act about half an hour into the movie because they kind of build up Danny's character and the relationship and the friends and everything. Then when they actually get to the communes, when things get interesting. Now, the issue is, I feel the movie takes way too long to get there. About halfway through the movie, is when something really, really gory happens. And when I say gory, I don't mean like comedic horror like Child's Play the remake or Evil Dead or any of that kind of stuff. This is like realistic gore. Like, this is stuff that, if you have ever studied the occult or read up on cults and weird rituals and things like that, you're going to recognize a lot of the imagery in this film. I mean, they dress in all white and things like that are just very unsettling. And the thing about the movie that I think is its strong suit is that the movie is not really scary, but it is very unsettling. It makes you feel weird as you're watching it. And I think part of the reason might be because he's taking so long to get there. And I'll be honest, it's a little bit too slow. That is one thing. I'm sitting there and I'm actually like starting to get bored, and then something good happens, but I'm kind of wanting the plot to kind of move along. And it does move along, but I think they could have accomplished the same thing faster. Like, when I look back on this movie, this could have easily been, obviously with more censorship and, obviously it had to be a little bit different, but they could have taken this story and made it into a 1-hour episode of Tales from the Crypt. Like, it really sort of, had that vibe to it. He took a while to get to the important stuff, and the movie's purposely trying to like mess with you, and you kind of know what's going on, but you don't really know what's going on. Like, you kind of have an idea that all is not as it seems, but it doesn't really pull a trigger on that until halfway through the film, and then close to the end of the movies when things get really, really weird. And there's ideas that Ari borrowed from other films like The Wicker Man. There's lots of that. There's also some Texas Chainsaw stuff in here, and of course from Hereditary. Now, the thing about Hereditary is it's a very disturbing film in that, like, the ending is really disturbing, and I was thinking about that ending for days after it ended. Like, that movie really stuck on my brain. This movie did not have that impact at all. It just didn't. Now, I'm not saying this movie sucks. That is not what I'm saying. The internet loves to kind of go back and forth on things, and you have to pick a side. I don't think this movie sucks, but I don't think it's great either. I think it's a decent horror film. I think there's a lot of imagery here that's disturbing, but I think also he's starting to slip into that sort of hostile kind of shock horror, sort of like what the Human Centipede did a while back. I sense that, and I hope this is not the case, but I'm sensing that he's starting to slip into that, where I think he was trying a bit too hard. I feel like Hereditary had a much better mystery to it, way more mystery, way more build-up, better overall narrative. This movie had great build-up, and the fact that he actually was able to take this relationship and make it the focal point, and you sort of see it falling apart, to me, is a good idea. It was a great idea, and he executed it decently, but it takes too long to get to the point, and then when it does, it doesn't feel as engaging or as interesting as what happened at the end of Hereditary, because that movie had a lot of stuff in it that was weird. This movie also is very weird. So if you're on the fence about this film, if you are being conservative, I would probably advise you to, and I know it's getting a lot of good reviews, but again, the critics, they trashed on Godzilla, which I loved. They praised Last Jedi, which I didn't like. You can't always trust them. I do think that if you want great filmmaking as far as the actual production side, because the movie looks great, beautiful, just the canvases, everything just looks great, and the acting is good. Like, technically this is a great movie. It's just not as engaging or as interesting as I thought it was going to be. And to me, it's really not worth seeing in the theater. Just being very real with y'all. I think if you want to wait for Netflix or maybe a DVD or whatever, and you're kind of saving your money for something better, Tarantino has a movie coming out later this month. It really depends on kind of your perspective on films. If you're a horror film fan, I don't have to tell you to go see this movie. You're going to go see it just based on what it is. But I just thought the storyline was not that engaging, and I thought he was trying too hard to, like, shock you. And again, the gore isn't, like, unrealistic gore, and there's not really any, you know, quote, torture like some of those movies have. But, you know, the scares come from more shock scares than atmospheric. And he tries to build up, like, the ending of the movie and the last act tries to build this up, but it just doesn't connect, and there's no real, like, struggle here. There's no actual struggle with the characters and what they're dealing with. It's just meant to kind of shock you. It's sort of like they took bits and pieces of what Hereditary did at the end and kind of sprinkled it throughout the movie without actually creating good characters, because I didn't really find these characters to be that interesting at all. You know, Florence Pugh plays Danny, Jack Rayner plays Christian. They're decent in their roles. I'm not saying that they were no good, but the characters just weren't that interesting to me. Like, even though we're supposed to feel bad for Danny, which we do, the way that it's executed at the beginning of the film kind of comes off more like a dream sequence than anything, which ends up playing into stuff later on. Now, one thing the movie does do well, really well here, is foreshadowing. There is some tremendous foreshadowing in this movie, and it's very subtle foreshadowing. And that's one thing I think this movie's going to get a lot of love for. It'll probably get an award nomination somewhere because of stuff like this, where you'll see the film and you'll see a character do something very subtly in the background, or you'll see a painting or some kind of imagery, like a painting, or you see a picture or something that you don't really get the context of it at all, but you know, like, it's very well done in that you know it's going to mean something later, because when the camera focuses on it, it has, like, extra time, and it's like, okay, this is probably going to mean something later, so I'm going to take a mental note, and that is exactly what it does, and it does pay off. So again, it's not a bad movie. It's an okay movie. It's a good movie. It's a movie that I'm probably never going to watch again, to be honest with you, because I got everything the first time I watched it. You know, it doesn't have that much replayability, but it is a film that if you watch it, you will be disturbed, but it's not the scariest thing ever or anything like that. But you will be disturbed, and I think he's going for that. He's going for that, you know, disturbing, he's going for that kind of vibe. But I think narratively it could have been better, and that's just my opinion on that. So yeah, that's my review for Midsommer, and it's funny, it came out in the middle of summer, but anyways, really weird movie, very strange. If you're used to stuff like Chucky and even stuff like Paranormal Activity, this is probably not going to be familiar to you, but I do always encourage people to expand their horizons. Horror should be done like this. I prefer more horror movies be like this, very ambitious and very different, than be just the same old stuff over and over again. I'm tired of seeing haunted house movies as well, you know. But again, I just felt like this wasn't executed as good as it could have been because of the characters. But the ideas, the imagery, what he did in the movie was good. So again, like I said, it's a very hard movie to review because I don't hate it, but I didn't love it either. You know what I mean? That's my opinion. So thanks again. Hope you have a good one, and I'll talk to y'all soon.